on this part of history, but what we can do is we can gather whatever advantages or whatever plots that we can take out of that part of history. Then we are going to go from the year 0 to the year 200, the doctrine of pacifism. So the doctrine of pacifism that emerged out of the place we call Egypt, and then it became the doctrine of Christianity, and then that doctrine of Christianity was taken by the Roman Empire and reconverged into a war doctrine. And so we are going to go into that. The war of Aksum Empire and the weakening of the Nubia. So, and the emergence of Christianity. Now, the sources that we are going to use for a lot of these history will be African sources. There is a book called The General History of Africa, a lot of volume 1, volume 2, is so many volumes to that. That's the source we are going to use fundamentally, History of Africa. The other sources we are going to use is probably Cheikh Anta Diop and other African writers. We're going to take a lot of our theme or from African writers and storytellers, but then we are also going to use an outside perspective. We are going to use outsiders' perspective on how we can, see what the outsiders thinks as well. So when it comes to the archaeological history of Africa, we deal with things like the Numidians, the Carthaginians, the Moors, the Ethiopians, the Phoenicians. These were all African people. So you've never been told that the Phoenicians were African people. You've never been told that the original Assyrians were African people. The original Persians were African people. They were all African people until they were, there was a lot of mixture, and then they gradually, the mixture, overran. So then we are going to go again. We are going in a reverse order. We are going to go to 23 BCE when Nubia and Egypt separated by foreigners, like when the foreigners came between a kingdom that was one called the single land or one land, one people. And then these foreigners came and they placed themselves between these two families of Africans and they separated them. So the foreigners, when they separated these Africans here, the struggle to reunite the Africans um, is all this period is just foreigners intersecting themselves between Africans. So we go to the queens of Nubia at that time, Amenerinas, and their armies pushing back the Romans. We're going to talk about that. Then we are going to talk about the Greek invasion into Africa. Um, and then how the Greeks were enslaved by the Romans afterwards, and how out of, we've heard many stories about the compassion of Hannibal. Hannibal, he goes to destroy the Romans. It's like this African king goes to conquer the Roman, to destroy the evil, the greatest evil empire that ever lived on planet Earth. He goes to destroy evil, then he decides to hesitate. So an African comes to destroy evil, and then the Africans say, you know what, I'm not going to destroy evil. Then when he hesitates, when the evil comes back, the evil destroys his family, kills all his people, annihilates him, right? And so this is a lesson we can learn from someone like Hannibal. We cannot make the same mistakes as Africans, where there's an evil empire that brings suffering and death to the whole world, and you have the chance to destroy this empire, and then you decide, you know what, I don't want to because it's not good and blah blah blah. And when you get to that level, you leave the empire where you had compassion, the empire turn and destroy your whole family, your whole lineage. And then not only that, the empire enslaved countless of generations for 700 years. So it is very, very important for African people to realize some of the mistakes that we have made. It's not that we are immune to mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It's only when you reject your mistakes, when you say, I refuse to account for my mistakes, this is when you fail in life, because mistake is a learning curve. It's not something you should be afraid of, you should hate, and you should not feel guilt or shame because you made a mistake. Rather, you should improve on where you made the mistake. So then we are going to go into the 400 BCE. This is when the people that came to be called the Greeks, they unified themselves, and then they had an ambition to rule the African people. They had envied the African people for a long time, but when they saw the African people had gotten so weak, they took the opportunity to attack the African people. And this is through a deal they make with this African called Ptolemy. In exchange, he would rule, he would marry into the Greeks, and then, this is why he did it. An African who was ambitious, he wanted a chance to rule. He went to the Greeks and he said, "Hey, if you guys put me on the throne, I'll marry a white woman, and then I'll marry, we'll breed our families together." And so the Greeks were eager to mix themselves with the Egyptian power. Then we go to the 26th dynasty. Basically, this is archaeology history, so we have to use archaeology sources. Then we go to the Assyrian ambition, when the Assyrians ambition, meaning that they were once Africans, but then they lost their way, and then they started to become, corrupt. And then the Kushite king, the final great effort of the African kings to keep the empire whole, to hold the empire together before the empire collapsed in totality. Then we are going to go into the legendary history. So we talk about the collapse of the empire, the African presence on the world stage slowly fading, and conflict, tribal chiefs, kings started to emerge. At this period, everybody wanted to be kings. Everybody wanted to have their own tribe. So this is the downfall period when the African starts collapsing, 1000 BC. The family of the Ramesside. The family, this is called the brilliant glory of the falling empire. So the empire is strong and is burning bright, but then towards the end, the empire starts to fall. The brilliant flame of the empire starts to fall. And then we have drought in the empire, so turmoil and lawlessness. When there's drought in Africa, African are an agricultural people, a cow herding people, etc., and all these things. So whenever there's drought and turmoil, the Africans associate these things with calamities, lawlessness, things can emerge out of that. So we go further back in history, 16 to 2100s, this is called the Golden Ages. So everything from this period is all Golden Age into African history. It's just legendary rulers, Golden Age, Africans at the zenith of human empire, the pinnacle of extraordinary Africans are in this part of the world. And then everything past 3000 BC, as the European call it, the 3000 BC period, this is called the mythological origin of African people. So this is the total timeline for your history. And then many of you have seen this image here before. And you've been told that this image represents zodiac. There is an echo coming from somewhere. Okay, thank you. So many of you have been told these things are zodiacs and all these things, right? The word zodiac is a Greek word, but in African system, this is a history book. This was the first history book of the African people. Before African people had invented any other form of telling history, this was the first history book. So this wheel of history you see right here, this is an entire history book that tells you every single thing that happened into the African people from the beginning of time to the end of time, right? And then, modern Africans might not know how to read this history book, right? Because we have lost the ability to read our history, right, for a long, long time. But this entire thing is a history book. This is not a astrological sign where you go and read your astrological sign. Rather, this is an entire history book telling you everything that happened in Africa. And all these images you see here and all these things are the time that Africans did something, like the time the invention of the farming tool, the first farming tool that was invented on planet Earth, the invention of the cooking pot, the invention of the first door, the invention of the first temple. All of these things here, the history tells you how far the African people's history goes back. So it is very, very, it goes into extreme like things that the African people did. The African, like they did some almost beyond extraordinary things. And that is why their history is enshrined in stone. So where our version of history is enshrined in stone, and it cannot be, no one can destroy stone. Stone in African culture represents where you keep your memories. African people associate stone with a memory. That means if you keep your memory inside of a stone, it will never be lost. So that's why they carve their memories or their history in stone. So for those of you who are used to thinking these are just zodiacs and blah, according to this is our entire history book of the whole history of Africa from the beginning of time to the end or the current age. So we are going to start the first opening. Organic African Paradigm presents the pinnacle of extraordinary African history. And the reason I call it the pinnacle of extraordinary African history because only the African people on planet Earth have a complete history from the beginning of time to the end of the current age. If you look everywhere in history, the Greek emerged in 300, 400 BCE. That's when the Greeks actually emerged. And then the other groups, the Romans emerged at 30 BC. They had no history before that. The Greeks had no history before that. The Phoenicians had a history way before that. And the Africans themselves had a history far, far greater. And there is no other group on planet Earth, not the Chinese, not the Japanese, no group on planet Earth has a complete accounting of their history like the African people. So, the first chapter we are going to focus on is colonization. What is colonization? And the second chapter, next time we all meet, we will talk about education. And the third time we meet, we will talk about economy. And then we will talk about foreign influence on the conflict on African soil. That's how we will complete the first chapter. Once this first chapter is done, then we will move on to another age, probably the 1800 and the 1700 combined. So chapter 1, Introduction into the Advents of the 20th Century. So from 1901 up to as far as I can take it, we are going to talk about the major advents where the Africans proved themselves to be extraordinary people. All right, it's very, very important that we focus on the extraordinary, the Africans striving to be an extraordinary people. So the advents of the 1900 begin with colonization. Colonization is an aim to destroy the African identity, the African knowledge of self. That is what colonization is. It is simply a goal to destroy the African knowledge of self. Then after that, it begins with education, re-educating the African into a quasi European identity. So to create this type of African that is a part European, part African, he's not whole and he's an incomplete person, or she is an incomplete person, or quasi-European African. So this is the second age, education. Then they go to culture. Then they start to bring in their culture into Africans, into African people's world, to drive out African culture, to push African culture into the shadows so that the Western culture can get prestige. And then they go into mentality, right? They're constantly trying and aiming for the African mentality, the African mindset, to captivate the African mindset so that they can be able to have total domination over the African people, economical domination. So in order for them to have economical domination, total economical domination, mentality, mindset, these are the key factors that they focus on. First, they look at mentality that the Africans have, then they look at the mindset that the Africans have, and this is what they use to enshrine their total economical domination. So they create a banking system, loans, debt, plundering. One of the fundamental resource African people had was palm oil. And today that industry is ruled by the Europeans who don't have a single palm tree in Europe. They are the greatest palm oil, get the largest revenue from palm oil, even though they don't have a single palm tree in their countries. So how is it that the Africans have the largest palm oil on planet Earth, and yet Africans have zero, a very minimal account of the economical structure. Rubber, right? Africans had all the rubber, like countries like Liberia, the Congo, is where all the rubbers come from. Yet Africans struggle to buy car tires, tires for their automobile. Africans, all these things, these are all made from rubber, and yet Africans cannot access these resources. They cannot use it. Diamonds, right? Every African should be wearing a diamond ring or a diamond necklace, right? But they are not able to wear that. Why? Even though the diamonds come from Africa, Africans are not able to acquire those things. Gold comes from Africa fundamentally, or the bulk of gold comes from Africa. Africans are not able to use it. Iron ores come from Africa, but the bulk of machinery are made abroad, and Africans are not able to have machinery. Um, Crude oil comes, Africa has the largest deserts in the world, and yet the crude oil industry, Africans don't have a share in it. So the rare earth minerals and even uranium, they all come from Africa, yet echo. Someone, there's an echo. Africa has the largest crude oil under the Sahara Desert and other parts of the Namibian desert, possibly, yet Africans don't have the ability to use any of these things. Why? Because of the quasi European identity, the mentality, the culture, the mindset that allows for total economical domination of the African. So the social colonization, how there are 5 layers or 5 pillars of colonization, how the African people were colonized in 5 ways. The first pillar of colonization is called the social colonization, how Africans organized themselves before the European came, and then how the original values that the Africans had, their interaction, their actions, their affairs, the matters of culture, and then how the Europeans said, you know what? We see you guys have your own values, your own interaction, your own affairs, your own actions, your own matters of culture, but we are not going to use those things anymore. You guys, from today on, you're going to throw that in the trash. And then from today on, you're going to take our way of using things. So from this point on in history, okay, the disturbance, someone help me with that. This is a little bit bothersome. Um, so they came in, the African people have all these systems already set up. And they tell them, say, you're not going to use this system anymore. We're going to take control. We're going to give you our way of thinking, our way of doing everything. You're going to take it, and you're going to become a quasi-European African. And from this point on, the African lose their social organization, and they go under social colonization. So now the Africans organize themselves how Europeans organize the Africans. They change their values to the way Europeans express their values, and their interaction and their actions, their affairs and their matters of culture. They take those things from the quasi European identity that was created for them. Now, the second thing is political colonization. Political colonization is about it destabilizes and creates dysfunctionality of the military of Africa. African people were a very militaristic people, not just the type of military that went around waging war, but it was more about militaristic discipline. They were a people that believed that men who had military discipline, those men could be able to do a lot of things. Those men could gain a lot of other virtues that men would not ordinarily have, right? So military discipline was an extreme part of one of the pillars of African culture. But political colonization destabilized military, and it created it established a dysfunctionality in the military of Africans, kind of weakened how African view warfare, battles, and all those things. It weakened their mentality towards warfare, making the African weaker and weaker as a military force in the world. So this was what political colonization is. What it was corruption, one, corrupting the African military mindset, and then pressuring on the leadership, and then pressuring the leadership, putting so much pressure on the leadership until the leadership collapsed, and then transferring the sovereignty from the leadership and the people to the colonial powers. So the goal was the Africans had their sovereignty. They had their, because of their military might. That's where they got their sovereignty from, their military might, their military prowess. But then the goal was, okay, we need to divert their, their sovereignty to us so we can control their sovereignty. So that is why they colonized politically, this, destabilize military mindset, and then transfer the sovereignty of the people to the colonial powers and replace with foreign-owned military system and leadership. So the intellectual colonization, right? The flow of ideas, political, social, economical, all these ideas, Africans used to have them. Africans used to assess their own system, come up with ways to fix their system. They have legislation, all type of land rights, everything were already enshrined. But the people came and they said, you know what? They took the intellectual ideas of Africans, brought it and refined it, and they patented it for themselves. But then when Africans tried to use their own ideas, they said, no, you guys cannot use your own ideas. You cannot use your own political, social, economical ideas. So they set themselves up as how do you call it? The academia of, they're the ones who control the academies. They're the ones who create the top universities in the world, the Harvard, the this and the that, and they set themselves up as these experts. So they're constantly coming to Africa with research as the research authorities. They're constantly coming. Look, we did some research on the river. You guys should stop drinking the river. We did some research on this food. Stop eating this food. We did some research on this stuff. Stop doing this stuff. And the more they put a stop to African people doing things that their ancestors had been doing for ages, the more they were able to gain intellectual property rights over those things. So Africans were taking traditional medicines and herbs. Those medicines could have been reformatted to serve Africans in a different way, but then they came with research, they came with experts, and then they brought documents, whole pages of analysis, statistics, evaluation, accreditation, academia, and before you know it, Africans gave up their intellectual struggle. The spiritual organization. Now, this is going to be a little bit difficult to talk about because a lot of Africans, because of the use of the word religion, Africans become very sensitive. But it is very difficult for us to go past and learn history if we cannot discuss the things that were brought into Africa, the way that they were brought into Africa. And so I'm not going to I'm going to be very careful as I speak on the aspect of religion, but I will have to relate what happened no matter, how difficult it might be to hear. I suggest you try to hear it. So the missionaries did play a key role in the colonization of Africans and the education of Africans. And they play not just a key role in Africa, but they play a role in China, they play a role in Japan, they play a role in Korea and other countries. The missionaries did do that. So Africa was just one of the continents that experienced the same thing. So the funding the Catholic Church and various Western religious institutions today, all the headquarters of African faith systems are in other foreign countries. And majority of the economical benefits that come out of these systems go to the send proceeds abroad to the headquarters. So the Catholic Church headquarters is in Rome. The other church headquarters are in Europe. And every time Africans gather enough money, the money is then transferred or wired into an offshore European account so that they can have access to that money. So Africans are still funding their own structure. So the most, the toughest one is the economical colonization, total economical domination, banking, loans, debt, plundering, palm oil, rubber, diamond, gold, crude oil, rare minerals. This is the one that we are living in. Then they even had something called colonial tax, right? And even what do you call it? Country like France forces countries like Ivory Coast and other French countries that they hold their money off in their territory, and then they also pay certain taxation on those money. So it is the most ridiculous thing. But how do the Europeans do this? The Europeans do it because they use, and I'm not gonna, I don't, it's difficult to keep saying you European, so I'm gonna use the word "Europe." Okay, don't mind the word. I just need to shorten the word. I can't keep saying you European. I say Europe. So the Yup people bring a psychological art of persuasion. One of the art that they used against the ancient African was the art of persuasion. So the psychological art of persuasion. So when they came to Africans, Africans never you didn't need to persuade an African to do something, right? But they came and they made, they make an argument. They entreat the Africans. They share their feelings, then when the Africans say this, they disapprove. But when they say this, they want the African to approve. So they did a lot of manipulation, a lot of psychological thing. They used the idea that they were sharing knowledge. They came to share science. They came to share religion, money, and all these things. These are all mechanisms they use in their tools of manipulation against Africans. So the youth machinations towards Africans. These are plans that they have before they even come to Africa. These are their machinations. Before they even come towards the African people, they already have a plan. And that plan is going to manifest whether you like it or not. They are coming with a plan. They don't come empty-handed, or they don't come just to hang out on the beaches. No, they always come with a machination, right? And the machinations that they come are these secret plans for accomplishing anything, unlawful subjugation of African people, evil actions, or they come just, like to commit genocide. Their plan is always hidden. So as an African, you should never ever say that, oh, because you go on the internet and you tell your plans to everybody else, because you constantly want to tell everybody your secrets, everything about yourself, doesn't mean that these people reveal their plans. Everything they do is they follow this youth machinations, is they always hold their plans towards African secret. And the plan, once it's revealed, the African is caught by surprise, like a trap person. The Africans reacting to the plan, but the hidden plan they come to Africans with, and then the African finally knows when it's too late. So that is one. So they have art of persuasion, machinations, influence on Africans. So the third one system they use now is the power and capacity of cause and effect. So they like to impact Africans in an indirect way or an intangible way. So they will come and they will put money down, or they will create celebrities, or they will create entertainment, right? So entertainment, celebrity, money, anything that will cause Africans to embrace their system, their cultural system, right? And so they're using influence to cause a cultural shift in Africa, to cause Africans to embrace behaviors and actions that are outside the origin of African culture. So there are these things that are enshrined in African culture. African culture is like Chinese culture or like Arab culture. Everybody has their culture. So they come to Africa with ability, like influences, these youth influence systems, and they use these systems indirect way or through financial means, through entertainment, through music, through art, to shift the actual African cultural lens so that the African can embrace their version of anything. Then the final one is manipulation. So these are the four systems that they use every time they interact with African: manipulation, influence, machinations, and persuasions. Okay, so the various methods, especially psychological warfare, like the most in art of manipulation they use is turning Africans against each other. Where you see the strongest use of manipulation is when two Africans are ready to kill each other. When a man and his wife starts taking, each of them pick up a knife and they start stabbing each other to death. That's when you know the manipulation has been successful. So this manipulation is very, very important. These four systems are very important in anytime they want to conquer African people. So that is why the first thing is to trigger fear, and then to pacify the African anger or redirect the African anger. So African are just like every other group on planet Earth. The only difference is when Africans get angry, what they do is they try to pacify the African anger. And then they try to redirect the African anger. And because the African is in a state of anger, he's not able to comprehend that his anger has been redirected. So now he's ready to kill his brother. Now he goes to his brother's house with a knife and he's stabbing his brother in the neck. And now, and then when it's done, then they come in now, they deal with him. So this is how they always do things. They set the African backwards through this one, where is trigger an action. To trigger an action in an African, a desired outcome, they use fear, or they pacify the anger of the African, or they redirect it towards internal to disarm the African, mentally, spiritual, like no African is powerful against it. Even a spiritual African is going to lose to that level of manipulation. So how was colonization established in Africa? Colonization was established through something called the left arm of government. The left arm of government is what you modern people today call corporations, businesses, right? So like Apple, or you call it what's the other not Samsung is not a European company. Maybe like Shell, or maybe like some mobile or something. I don't know, like De Beers Diamond or something. Like they came to Africa as in left arm formation. Right, the right arm is the government, the military, the hierarchy of leadership. The left arm is the business apparatuses. So you're talking about a corporation, and so they came to Africa with the left arm. And that is very, very important for you as an African to know. So when you are watching, when they say foreign investors, when they're bringing foreign investors into the African continent, those are always people you call the left arm. Those are the left arms. So companies and corporations have served a mandate as the left arm of governments. The right arm is when the full-scale military invasion happens, when the armed conquest and the subjugation of the African people under imperialism, etc. Before that happens, the left arm always comes. So this is what they do. They have a left arm and a right arm. Now, the Europeans use two main culture as their base culture. Two main culture. Greco and Roman culture is the foundational culture. So you know how people say, okay, there's an echo. I'm hearing an echo. Help me with that, please. So they have two foundational culture that they use. Everywhere they go, they are going to use this until the end of time. These two foundational culture are called the Greco culture and the Roman culture. That's their two foundational culture. That means if you dig to the bottom of their house and you reach under the house, the first cornerstone, the right cornerstone and the left cornerstone, you are going to find the Greco culture and the Roman culture. That is their cornerstone. So, when they come to Africa to teach us anything, they're teaching us from their cornerstone, the two cornerstones that hold their culture together. So this is the Greco and the Roman culture. So anytime you interact with their system, that is the two culture that you are going to be. If you go to a medical school, by the time you're done with medical school, you will be very fluent in Greek. If you go to the military, by the time you're done with the military, you'll be very fluent in Roman doctrine, right? And so this is how the two structures work. So they hold the European, unlike where they promote disunity and segregation in Africa, they have a system of armistice, a code of armistice that has been established since the Greco-Roman period. So they follow this code of armistice. A lot of people don't know. Africans don't know. There's like, oh, these people, no, they have a code of armistice, meaning that they have an actual a system that holds continental unity together. Only when there is an outside threat, when there is an outsider coming to attack them, they use this code of armistice. When they have an outside enemy or someone that they're going to go rob, they're going to go steal, this code of armistice has always been put into effect. Now, what is their code of armistice? Temporary stopping of all warfare inside their hinterland, their mainland, and then amongst themselves until they defeat or destroy or annihilate the outsiders. When they're done with the outsiders, then they will go back to civil war amongst themselves. But while the outsiders present, the code of armistice is enshrined. They don't break the code of armistice. And when one of them make the mistake of breaking the code of armistice, like Germany did, they punish that person in a devastating way, and they occupy that person's land to the point, that's why the military, when Germany was defeated during the Paris Peace Conference, they took all the colonial lands of Germany, they took all their resources, then they occupied their country, and they disband their military, their ability to form a military. So if you break the code of armistice, they're coming for you, right? So this is a very, very thing that is enshrined in their culture. And this goes back to the Pax Romana, right? The Pax Romana was where the Romans would establish these kind of a peace treaty amongst all their people so that they could be able to go outside and destroy other people. So this is their natural code of armistice that they have. And Africans, we don't have this code of armistice amongst ourselves. So this was one of the reasons we were able to be, defeated in a way. So let us reflect on maybe Africans need their own code of armistice where Africans can now have a saying where maybe there will have no internal conflict while we are dealing with outsiders. While outsiders are here trying to harm us, we would have no more internal conflict. So that is the introduction. And let's begin the first, and I'm keeping track of the time, so I will stop as soon as I finish the first layer, and then we are going to go into questions. All this is just introduction. This is the first chapter right here now, officially. What is colonization of Africa? Now, the definition of colonization, according to Wikipedia, is a process of establishing a peaceful or violent occupation by a group into a place, right? So, or a group of people not from your house come to your house, and they either establish themselves in your house peacefully and take over, or they establish themselves into your house violently and take over and force you to do what they want to do. So that is in a sense of colonization. It's for you to intrude into someone's house or land or place of dwelling, and then to have a violent takeover of that person's territory, and for the purpose of cultivation, exploitation, trade, possible settlement, setting up coloniality, and etc. Basically, you come to my house, for either to help me grow to become a better person, or you come to exploit me, or you come to trade with me, or you come to, possibly live in my house with me. That is what colonization is in a basic understanding. So did they come to Africa for cultivation? Because let's see what did they come? Which one of colonization happened in Africa? Was it cultivation? No. Cultivation is an agricultural art to grow, to develop the African people. Did they come to develop the African people? No. Did they come to develop the African land and African soil and establish farmlands for Africans? No, they did not. The action of developing Africans through care, patience, practice, hard work, labor, building, refining, allowing growth to take place, instilling a higher culture. Did they instill any of those things in Africa? No. So the colonization, they did not come to cultivate Africa. So that we can take that part of the colonization out of the equation. The second type of colonization is exploitation. To put African natural resource, renewable and and a limited resource into the service of Europeans globally. Now, you can put this in the chat, which one you think, you guys can vote, which one you think they came to do. After I'm done explaining all the forms of colonialization, you can pick which one you think they came to do. You can just put it in the chat for me. So exploitation, they came to put African natural resource, the renewable, the limited resource into the service of Europeans globally without, like paying for it, without having any kind of fair exchange. It was all unfairly. They wanted to take advantage on unfair advantage of it. So that is the second type of colonization. So we can say, I mean, we can say, yeah, that's what they came for. The second thing is trade. The voluntary transfer of goods or service between different economical actors, an exchange. Now, the Europeans came, did they come to exchange and trade goods with Africans? And is that trade, you know, a fair trade? Is it lasting today? Do we have a fair trade relationship with them? Was it fair when it started? And is it still fair? I mean, what is the situation? What type of colonization did they bring? Did they come to trade or not? Right? Because you have to, if they came to trade, that means there would be a fair exchange of goods and there would be like a continued relationship of fairness in trading. So the fourth one here is this type of colonization is to settle. They came looking for land to stay on. They didn't have land in their homeland. They didn't have enough land for their people. Maybe they were, they had turned on each other. They were burning their women at the stake, during the period of the Little Ice Age. They reverted to cannibalism, mass massacres, killing people every chance they get, and then um, they went to around the world to look for places they could settle and they could have new lands where they could live and spread their culture. So settlement, they came to Africa to establish Africa as their new home, to bring their culture into Africa, to occupy the land, having children, and then passing the land on to their children, their grandchildren, to make Africa their permanent home. So that's the fourth type of colonization. And then the final type of colonization is the imperialism, a state policy towards African practice or advocacy of extending power and dominion over Africans by gaining political and economical control over Africans. So, are they trying to gain or extend their power over African, their dominion over African? Do they try to control the political system of Africa, the economical system of Africa, so that Africans remain subjugated under them? So the question for all of you here is, which of the following type of colonization was brought to Africans by Europeans? Which one of these were taught in your high school or your college? Now, I know all of you went to school, all of you are educated people, but I'm curious to know which one of these four types of colonization, or these five types of colonization were you taught about in your high school? So if you want to write it in the chat for me, which one you learned about in your high school and which one they explained to you that they came and they brought, and that is what we experience, or which one do you think they brought and we are experiencing? So that would be my question for all of you. You can put it in the chat. Now, why did the Europeans come to Africa? This is the very, very, very important question you need to know, right? Because if they came to Africa and they did all this colonization stuff, we need to know why, right? Why? So now, when was colonization? When did colonization officially happen, and what was the vehicle of colonization? Colonization itself was a European mandate first conceived by Pope Nicholas V of the Catholic Church. So the first idea, the first concept of colonizing people came from Pope Nicholas V. All right. And he was the vicar of Christ at that time of the Pope, the church. And the first doctrine of colonization is called the Dum Diversa. The first doctrine of colonization is called the Dum Diversa. This Dum Diversa, all of you know it as called the Doctrine of Discovery, but the original name is the Dum Diversa, the mandate of all of Europe. So, what is a mandate? A mandate is typically like a command from God given unto a people. Like some of you who are familiar with the Bible, there is a mandate from the Hebrew gods or the Israelite gods for them to go and conquer and take over the land of Israel. They went on the way to go and conquer that land and kill the people. That's called a mandate. A mandate is an idea, or it is something that was, is a divine order or law that comes directly from a higher source and is given to the people. And the people, all the people in the land follow the mandate, right? The Chinese had their own system called the mandate of heaven. And then the African people also had the mandate of the creator. In the original African culture, they had something called the mandate of the creator. And then the Romans also created their own, and this called the Dum Diversa, the mandate of Europe. So the mandate was given by the highest authority of the Europe, which is the Pope, and the spiritual father of all Europeans, which is again the Pope. The mandate of European conquest was called the Dum Diversa, Doctrine of Discovery. And it was created during the period we call the Age of Discovery, the 1400s. It is a policy that originated in the 15th century or the 1452, initially enacted by the Catholic Church. It proclaimed the rights of Christian nations to possess the land belonging to non-Christians in order to save their soul. Basically, the mandate of Europe, or the Dum Diversa, said that they could leave Europe, go to Africa or Asia or Native America, Australia, and they could come and they could confiscate the land from you, any way they see fit. They could kill you, kill your wife, your children, take the land, and then they could say, you know what? We did it to save your soul. And they had to teach you Christianity in the process. They had to. They could not. You had to learn it, and they had to take the land. That's the two. So they came to America here, and then they took the Native American land. They taught them the doctrine. They went to South America. They took the land from the Native American. They taught them the thing. And then they came to Africa. They managed to take some of the lands from the Africans, and then they taught them the doctrine. But the Africans are a stubborn people. They tend to resist so much, like they have this stubbornness where they resist more than other groups around the world. Other groups, they didn't struggle as much as the Africans, but the Africans, they have this habit of struggling too much, and so that was why they didn't take all the land. But they managed to be able to pass on the doctrine to the African people, but they just didn't take all the land. So the doctrine itself, if you read the doctrine itself says it allows European nations to acquire special rights, including property rights, sovereignty right, when they discover new land. So anytime they came across a new land, right, they must they can have a special property right over that land, and that decision was not even made on African soil. They had to go to the Pope, and the Pope had to give them a judgment which one of them the land belonged to. So, like you're sitting in Zimbabwe on your father's land that your great grandfather gave you long time ago, and then two Europeans come, they see your father's land, and they go back, they start fighting each other over your father's land. But then they go back to the Pope, and the Pope say, well, the first person, which one of you arrived to the Zimbabwean land first? Then this guy say, I did, right? And then he will say, okay, the Pope will say, okay, you have the right of discovery. So you go and then remove the Zimbabwean off his land and take the land from him. So that is how they went about it. They would go and dispute it amongst themselves who saw the land first. So like Victoria Falls, who saw Victoria Fall? I saw Victoria Fall and I name it Victoria Fall, thus it belongs to me, right? And this is who saw the Niger River first. I saw the Niger River first, so I get to name it the Niger River. And this is how they went around in Africa naming things and giving their names and their culture to everything they saw in Africa. Every single thing that they could find, they named it because it was a right of claiming. I claim this in the name of my people. I own this, right? So this is why so many things in the world belong to them, right? Like their names are on it because their doctrine of discovery says that you have a special right, including property and sovereignty right, when you discover it. If you only way you can discover it is for you to put your name on it. Okay? Now, even the U.S. Supreme Court Justice John Marshall was using the doctrine of discovery as a way against the Native American, like, oh, we discover your territory, so technically it belongs to us, etc. So they giving you the title over a territory because you're the first person to step foot there. Soon as you step foot in my house, you discovered my house. So this is the papal decree that we call the Dum Diversa. It gives you the right to take someone's property because you step foot in it or because your eyeball happened to land on it first. So this was created in 1952, and it was sanctioned by the Pope, and they went to colonize everyone who wasn't a Christian, and to make them a Christian, take the land, take the resource, etc. So the vehicles they used, first primary tool they used to take those things from Africans were companies, corporations, the left arm of colonization. So at this point now, they put together ships and crews, and then they mixed the crew with military personnel, and the ship and the captains could report directly to the kings or the monarchies. And they sent them out as the left arm of the monarch to explore the world and gather intelligence on every group of people they came in contact with. So that is why they were always asking our people questions. Tell me who you are. What's your weakness? How do I stab you or how do I kill you in your sleep, right? Like they were asking our ancestors all those questions. Tell us your secret. How do we get you? How do we like bury you alive? They were asking those questions all the time. So when the Africans would tell them, oh, yes, my weakness is if you cut this small chain on my neck, and then now you will be able to kill me. And the African would tell them, and then they would say, okay, now we have the secret. We'll go back and tell our people. They will come back for you guys. So this was the vehicle that they used, the left arm of the monarchs, to go in and start corporations to gather intelligence for the monarchy conquest. These legal entities, these companies and corporations formed by the merchants and the explorers, were to engage and operate as a business first, and so that you could be fooled as an African, and secondary to ensure the mandate of Don Diversa. They were to ensure that Don Diversa, or colonization, they followed that mandate. Gather information about the land and the people, their political structure, their social structure, their economical structure, their spiritual structure, and their intellectual structure. That's why when they went back to Leopold and they told Leopold everything about Africa, he said these people already know God. You're not going there to give them God. You're going there to convince them to leave their land, to leave their resources to us. So go there and convince them to give up their rights, their privileges, their land, etc. Anything they own, convince them to give it to us under Don Diversa. So Don Diversa is where they took African stuff. They report back to their governments, and they would be granted legal monopoly for carrying out those activities. So if whoever goes back to the monarchies and tell them, hey, we convinced the Africans, we got all the knowledge on the Zulus, we got all the knowledge on the Khoi, we got all the knowledge on the Maasai, we know what type of spear, how they make their spear, we know how far they can jump. Whoever brings back all this knowledge to the government, we will give you monopoly over the trade routes. So this was the charter company, the age of charter company, Lever Brother, or the Unilever. Every Nigerian knows about the Unilever, the Dutch East India Company, VOC, the East Asian Expedition Corp. All these corporations came to Africa as companies, and they were moving around trafficking Africans from one shore to another shore. They would traffic Africans all the way from West Africa, all the way to South Africa. They would traffic Africans from all the way Madagascar, all the way to another part of Africa. They were trafficking Africans. These corporations were moving Africans. So it's very difficult for you Africans to say, oh, we are not mixed anymore, because these people were moving Africans from Kenya to all the way to Southern Africa. They were moving Southern Africans all the way to East Africa, all the way to West Africa. They were moving Africans across the border, across the line as slaves and merchants. So not merchants, as slaves. So I don't know how Africans can say, well, we are so different. It's difficult for you to say you're different because so many of your people have been moved around. So the company possesses the left arm of government powers. So the left arm of governmental powers, what are those powers? They done Versat, these companies would have the ability to wage war on behalf of the empire. They could wage war. They could imprison Africans or wage war against Africans. They could execute anyone who are convicted or people that they deem fit. They could negotiate treaties with kingdoms and kings. They could create their own money and they could establish a colony, their own colony. So this is the powers that the corporations were given when they left Europe under the monarchy. When they arrived to Africa, they had all these power, the power to wage war, the power to imprison, the power to execute Africans. So they were very, very much set up. And when they came, they could transport African war captives. They had the power to transport an African war captive. They could make a promise on behalf of the monarch, but that didn't mean the monarch would agree or fulfill the promise. So they could go to an African king. They say, hey, my queen, she's going to do this, she's going to do that. Let me sign, da, 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 da. But then when the African tribe asked them, say, hey, can you fulfill on this promise you made? Your servant said this, then it was a lie. So they wouldn't fulfill the promise. Basically, it was like a left arm, which is the governmental arm, which is the corporations, and the right arm, which is the military might when they come now to fight you. So some of them were there to, they were, these corporations were owned by ordinary citizens. People would buy stock in them, people would invest in them, and they would, their mission would go, they would gather intelligence on Africans and other group of people. They would learn all their weaknesses, bring it back to the military. The military would use those. They would innovate ideas. They would steal culture. They saw something Africans were doing that was better, they would steal the ideas, come back, and they would make it into their own ideas. So they weren't just gathering intelligence, they were stealing ideas for innovation. They were acting as spies, they were acting as soldiers on behalf of the monarch to wage war, but also they were acting as saving the souls of the Africans. They had to go and save certain amount of souls to convert certain amount of Africans. So they tried this in Japan, where they converted enough Japanese people to the Christian Catholic religion, and they were going to use them to uprise against the Japanese government and to cause a chaos. But the Japanese, under Hideyoshi, slaughtered every single one of them. They exterminated all of them. They were Japanese citizens, but these people used them and they caused them for them to end up in this way. So we are getting towards basically all this just touch on the companies and how they play their part. There's the photo of the doctrine of discovery. There's the original doctrine of discovery, and there's the part here that we grant you from the Pope, the exact word from the Pope. We grant you full and free power through the apostolic authority by this edict to invade, conquer, fight, subjugate the Saracens and pagans. The pagans would be Africans, the Saracens would be the Muslims, and other infidels and other lands, places, estate camps, and any other possession, mobile, immobile goods found in all these places held, whatever name and held and possessed by the same. Basically, he said, go and take everything from these people. So we are going to stop here for the first chapter. When we come back again, we will talk about declaration of war against the Africans. All of you know what declaration of war is, Berlin Conference, and this is when the Africans are struggling for their freedom, their sovereignty, and this entire chapter will just talk about war, war, war. So the Africans are in a fight for their life. But let's stop right over here at the end of colonization, and let's now begin our conversation. I will hand over the floor to all of you, or the moderator.
Thank you so much, my king. This is very wonderful. Indeed, you did a great job. May you be blessed. To the listener, I think we have got something very important. This is just a step to break the bondage, to have that self-belonging, to feel that Africa also is very special to us. and it is also our duty to protect it for the next generation. They can have something to say. That self-belong is very important. We appreciate all that the speaker just tabled before us. So this is the time for interaction session. We'll allow floor for 4 questions. So you just raise your hand. I will give you opportunity. Also your name, then your question. 4 questions. The floor is very open. So feel free.
Hello, maybe before they can come in, as they are preparing to raise their hands, let's say thank you so much with this insight. This gives us as Africans our identity, and we have to know where we lost it so that we also have to know how we can regain what we lost. So this is the main purpose, to know ourselves, and so that we can team up and try to recover where we lost. Thank you so much, Teacher Mitri. This is quite opening and so encouraging. Also, those who have questions or anything to ask the teacher before we can end the session, we'll just give you time when you raise your hand to ask. If there are no questions, we are all satisfied. That would be great. We can assume we'll meet. Let's just check those with questions so that they can come in board. Thank you.
Yes, even if you don't have any question, you may have a comment. Oh, thank you so much.
Yes, Queen Juliana, can you come on board?
Positive and creative energy to all of us today. Thank you to Master Teacher Maitri, because he has answered my main questions. Throughout my life, I have been asking myself, how did these white manage to dismantle the system we had? We were able to establish this the civilization everywhere on earth. Everywhere it was us. I was wondering, how did they do that? So today we have learned how they prepared, how they structured, what are the different components of their strategy. So if we are going to defeat them, we have to have the same. We cannot be talking against the religion, leaving politics, leaving army, leaving this and this, and think that we are going to succeed. We are going nowhere, because all we do is describe what we see. No, for us to succeed, we have to put in place the same system. And it was not done in one day. And it was not done on social media. We have really to be strategic, to have one system and organize ourselves how we are going to implement it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you so much. I think that's a comment or addition. Mike King, you are welcome. UJA, please. I've seen your hand.
Yes, thank you very much.
They're not getting you clear from the other side. I don't know. Please. My king, UJA, please. Are you there? I think network problem. Any other person? You may have a comment addition. Please also, you are welcome. It seems we have satisfied what the teacher of tonight have just tabled before us.
King Amaka,
Yes.
King Amaka, are you there?
Yes, I'm getting you, my queen.
Okay, so there are hands up. I don't know. You have to watch the comment session. I mean, the names you realized people have actually raised their hands. Have they been able to make a point?
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, King Ademena.
Yes, yes, yes. Good to connect with you once more, Queen Abala.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much. After hearing everything that has been said, and of course, I tell people no different from what people have mentioned. People who do not know their history are bound to repeat the same mistakes in the future. Having set that preeminence, having heard what Princess Kanku had mentioned, sure, the only way to win this battle or to win this war is to fight the oppressors according to their own game. However, sometimes I would tell people I disagree with that, but not totally, because you can fight somebody and I would have this discussion, and the only thing he would emphasize is you fight them intelligently. Sure, you can fight them intelligently. You can surpass them in the so-called system they set up. That is fine. You could surpass them wherever they feel they excel. Yes, that is one part of the equation. If you do not share that information with your fellow brothers and sisters, your fellow kings and queens, and teach them how, that is key. Teach them how to be able to defeat these people by their own game, then the fight according to these people's game would be rendered absolutely useless. There are two adages and or proverbs. The first one says, a broomstick cannot sweep on its own unless other broomsticks gather together. Another one says, when the cattle unite, the lion lies down and dies of hunger. How do we liken that unto How do we liken that unto ourselves? It is one thing if Queen Abala or Queen Kanku or King Amuka or King Akwago would be fighting this battle on their own. Obviously, they cannot do it alone. That is why a lot of people have equally mentioned pretty much the same thing. Folks like Bob Marley and Peter Tosh have mentioned, come together. Come together. They have emphasized that because it is only by coming together that one would be able to defeat these people according to their own game. Just very early this morning, I had the same conversation with a boy I knew back in Nigeria. I told him, even I living in the United States, for instance, I deal with people who do not look like us on a daily basis, given where I am. What these people would do, some of the time they would smile at you, they would act all friendly, they would act all hospitable, the whole 9 yards. But when the rubber hits the road, or when the litmus test is being defined, they will ditch you, they will ditch me without second thoughts. And so having said that, I told this boy, there are times where even if people will act, oh, we are one, we are together, we love our African brothers and sisters, or some of them would say amigo and things like that. When it comes down to it, even if they have got their own problems, they will lay a truce aside when they see the common interest of eliminating or obliterating you and I out of the way. And once they have succeeded eliminating or obliterating just one more king, just one more queen, they will then resume their squabble. I cannot tell you how many times I have faced that myself. That is why at one point I equally had to change the game. That means even where I am right now, in as much as sometimes I may not have that option, given